Hello and welcome to the Comparesoft Maintenance Podcast. In today's episode, we're exploring what it takes to maintain a 710-acre university estate safely, sustainably, and on a tight budget. I'm joined by Kerry Boyce, Director of Maintenance at University of Warwick, where she is responsible for more than 500 buildings, including student residents. Kerry brings a mix of engineering, infrastructure and maintenance leadership experience, having worked across large utility projects, transport for London and the London Underground, and the Royal Opera House. We unpack large-scale campus maintenance, asset lifecycle planning, knowing when to repair, refurbish or replace, how to balance planned and reactive maintenance, and the practical steps to future-proof large estates. Kerry, it's great to have you on the podcast. How are you?
I'm really well, thanks. It's great to be here, Ryan. Thank you for inviting me.
Excellent. So, Kerry, you started in electrical engineering, where you were designing substations and transmission infrastructure. How did that early exposure to high risk, high reliability systems shape the way you approach maintenance today?
I think, that's a really good question because it has really shaped how I think about things. And because those systems operate in a high risk, high reliability environment, that experience fundamentally shapes how I think about maintenance today. It did teach me three things early on, which I sort of live by today. The first one is safety and compliance. They're non-negotiable. You can imagine the high risk you get in the transmission and electricity world. So when you're dealing with the critical infrastructure, you quickly understand that processes, standards, disciplined maintenance, that's what protects people. So second was I was probably design and maintenance must be connected. So without those two being connected, you don't get the reliability, and reliability really suffers over the time. And the third is data. Data's king and data matters. So good engineering decisions come from understanding how assets behave over their life cycle. So today, I suppose, even though the environment is very different in the university, I think I approach the university estate with the same mindset: critical assets, disciplined maintenance, and relentless focus on safety and reliability. For me, that's the most important thing.
That's awesome. So how it could switch between completely different sectors but still have the same fundamentals, you know?
Yes, exactly. That I think the high risk, high critical risk area really did shape how I think about it today. And my colleagues will tell you I'm always going safety first. Safety comes above everything. So that really did shape me early on in my career. And I was really quite thankful how that has shaped my career, because that's really given me some good fundamentals.
And you've had key roles across, multiple utility products and projects in complex maintenance settings. How did those environments shape your approach to things like risk, maintenance discipline, and asset reliance? What sort of lessons stayed with you there?
I suppose the system reliability. I suppose utilities taught me system reliability at scale, a really big scale early on. Transport taught me operational discipline, public safety. That was a really critical role in understanding and the protection of the public. And I suppose the Royal Opera House taught me different things I hadn't been exposed to, and it sort of taught me how buildings support world-class experience. So they're all very different things, but they're all sort of closely related. So the underground, for example, you're maintaining infrastructure that millions of people depend on every day. So the tolerance for failure is extremely low. Maintenance planning has to be incredibly structured. You really got to know what your maintenance structure is going to be. The Royal Opera House, the focus shifted slightly from the building that becomes part of the performance. So every system must work seamlessly, so the audience experience is really flawless. So I think that how they translate into the university is the modern campus is like a small city. So it has residential, teaching, research, cultural space, all operating seamlessly and simultaneously. So the challenge becomes ensuring the infrastructure enables our excellence, really.
Yeah, and you touched on it there. It's like a small city. I mean,
yes.
Director of Maintenance at University of Warwick now, you're responsible for, I think, 710-acre estate, 500 buildings, thousands of student residents. It is like a small city. But when people hear, university maintenance, they might often imagine classrooms, lecture halls. Can you describe the real scale and the diversity of assets that you're responsible for?
Yeah, I think approaching it as a small city has really worked for me. I think it's really quite similar to my role in the utility of that was in the city, but of the bringing that experience and that complex environment, that complex urban environment together. So
Mm.
I think the Warwick estate is we've got so many different diverse buildings. We've got academic buildings, student residence, laboratories, sport facilities, infrastructure networks. We've got theatres and event spaces, energy. So it's all in the public realm. It's all critical. I mean, the complexity lies not just in the number of assets, but their criticality to how the university functions and how they interact with each other. So I suppose the research labs, for example, they require different environmental control, and that's compared to residential accommodation or teaching spaces. So all of them, again, I'll come back to safety, all of them must be safe, reliable, compliant, adaptable, all while supporting sort of a world-class academic environment. So I think the only way you can run a campus like this or maintain a campus like that is by treating it as a small city, by treating it as all the infrastructure is important and they all do rely on each other. Um, so yeah.
And what did your first 90 days look like in this role? It's such a big
Mm.
undertaking. What sort of data were you collecting? Maintenance decisions were you prioritising?
Yeah, I think the first 90 days is critical to any role that you go into, but I think especially jumping from sector to sector,
Mm.
um, from government to utility to event spaces. This was my first venture into higher education, so my first priority was understanding the estate, and that's through data and people. And it meant sort of three parallel activities, I think. I said, first thing I did was asset visibility, understanding what we actually own, its condition, its criticality. That's crucial. That was crucial for me. The second was probably the compliance assurance, understanding statutory maintenance regimes, safety standards, make sure they're robust, they're transparent, we're where we need to be. And I think the third was engaging with my maintenance team. I've got quite a big maintenance team, and I'm really thankful. I've got such a good maintenance team. Their technical ability is second to none. So they hold an enormous amount of knowledge and about knowing how the buildings behave, knowing what the failures are, the risks are. So I think my aim in the first few months was not to change everything immediately,
Mm.
but to build a clear picture of the states and create confidence in our direction. So yeah, that's
How,
what I did.
how did you undertake that asset visibility process? Like, there's obviously so many assets across
Yeah.
that campus. What was the process to really get them under control?
I think first thing I did was a couple of couple of weeks sitting in, understanding the campus from a desktop sort of viability. But then it was really getting out and about on the estate,
Mm.
going out with the teams, going out with different faculty members. Visiting faculty is really important because I might have a perception of what that faculty does, but I think visiting the faculty and understanding their challenges. That was really important to me. I think that beats any desktop study that you might be looking at. Might be looking at data,
Mm.
but visiting the faculty and understanding their research requirements and the fabulous things that they're doing really helped me understand what our critical assets were and what our critical asset list looked like and how they interacted with each other. It might be, I might think it's not a critical asset, but when I look at the research that it holds and the funding we have
Mm.
from that research, it definitely is a critical asset. So it's something we need to give a critical asset rating to. So yes, it was definitely about boots on the ground, getting out and about, and I love getting out amongst the team and the estate. Seeing our students using the facilities is really important to me as well.
Yeah.
Seeing how they interact. So
You get an
yeah.
understanding of how each facility, each asset works then as well.
Yeah, and what it's actually used for, and how it's changed. I think when I was at university, things have definitely changed. So I think how our students today use our spaces is
Mm.
is is good to actually watch that in action. So how they interact and how they study was good to get out and see. So
And you
yeah.
said there this is your first time really in education facility, higher education. in your experience, what would you say are the biggest operational challenges that are unique to that sort of sector when you compare it to your previous like transport and venue sectors?
Oh, unique. I suppose it's interesting because I think because we operate 24 hours a day across different environments. I mean, the London Underground well, we did shut down for obviously engineering hours. Only 4 of those were engineering hours, but we're actually going 24 hours a day because students are living here. It's a city. It's a space that it's like a small town.
Mm.
So I think that was really interesting. I think that was the challenge, knowing that it's 24 hours a day. We've got campus events going on 24 hours a day. We've got um, theatre spaces being used, but people live in this. It's their home for quite a few years. So I think that was the challenge. That was understanding that it operates 24 hours a day. So. But yeah, I think other challenges unique for university. When I think about it, I'm just thinking about it. I think because we've got cutting edge laboratories here, um, that was a bit. Some of the research that we do here is
Mm.
obviously world class research, and that was a really interesting understanding. And I think because I come from an engineering background, I think it's amazing the stuff that we do. So that was really interesting, understanding the challenges that our infrastructure that they face with our infrastructure and how we need to change our infrastructure to meet their requirements for
Yeah.
research. And I never really had residential accommodation under me before, so that was a big change for me. I think that was, these are people's homes for 3 years. These people have come here to study, and we need to make that, a good environment for them, and a welcoming environment, and make sure that they do feel at home and safe, and that their environment meets their needs. So
Yeah, and I was going to touch on there, just, universities don't have unlimited capital. So that's always going to be a challenge, sticking with budgets. And I'm curious, like, how does a constrained budget sort of
mm.
change the way you prioritize maintenance or even, get your asset visibility in order?
Yeah, I think, yes, obviously all of a state all of university in the university sector across everywhere, we've all got the
Mm.
same, the same constraints. But I think prioritization is probably essential here, and that's where we talk about, the 3 lenses I've talked about. It's safety and compliance first, operational resilience second, and student and academic experience is going to be third. But safety for me will always come first. But I do need to prioritise the assets, meaning to support the critical teaching and research activities. Um, so that's always in the top of mind. That's always in the top for me. But when you've got constrained budgets, we've got the strong asset lifecycle management becomes really important. You need to extend the asset life responsibility while maintaining it, actually, while maintaining the reliability of it. That it's how you can do that. So I suppose good maintenance is not about spending money; it's about spending intellectually. I think that's where we've got to really hone in on where we spend our pounds.
Yeah. And we stick with asset lifecycle management. Like something you're really passionate about, you spoke to me about, is the importance of reuse, refurbishment, repurposing,
Mm.
rather than default to replacement. What
Yes.
what practical framework do you use when you decide whether to repair, refurbish, or replace a bit of equipment or an asset? How does that decision come about?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because that is obviously something I'm really passionate
Mm.
about, and I know the team are starting to do a lot more refurbishment now. But I think it comes with, I think you've really got to look at the asset history, the maintenance history, the failure trends, the criticality. All of those things come into the matrix of how you make those decisions, how you prioritize the funds that you have. What assets can you sweat, but what assets can you not sweat? And it might be a high value to replace those assets, but if it's at its end of its life cycle, or it's impeding research, or it's impeding teaching,
Mm.
that's where you've got to actually see that information is critical to making those decisions. I think without that information, we're just really reactive. Then we're not being as efficient as we should be. So I suppose, yeah, but I think data quality as well. I think when I'm looking at failure reporting and failure trending, the quality of data, you've really got to have top quality data. I think that technology supports the culture. And so I think my engineers are starting to see now. I think that's part of enabling them to understand why the asset data capture is really important. And I think taking the time to explain that to them and demonstrate that to them, it's almost like they join in. They become part of this journey. Then, and that's just part of being a professional engineer, I suppose, and engineering practice.
Yeah.
So I think it's educating my team and why we're doing things. I'm a big believer in, I'm not going to dictate, but this is why we're doing this. And if I can show them the full journey of that and the full life cycle journey of that, they really buy into that.
And I suppose that's you building that new culture out, isn't it? Having your engineers look in terms of asset life.
Yeah, that's really starting to come to fruition for me now. I mean, today I've had somebody call me, and I'm starting to, I've spent a few months starting to go through this, but it really did come through to fruition because somebody's phoned me today and they've got an idea for our asset life cycle replacement. And they've actually gone out and they've done all the trending analysis themselves. They've actually come up to me with a cost for it. They've come up with me to a couple of different options. And that's really just since I've been here, that's really encouraging to see because, a state this size, I can't know everything. My team are so important to another, they're my right hand. So having that engagement with the team is vital, really.
That must feel like a really proud moment.
Yeah, it does. It does, because I feel like I'm enabling the team and I'm giving them that voice and I'm giving them that support, and they do know this stuff. They can make these decisions, and I am seeing that they are really, really joining in. And I've got great aspirations. I think we're going to be doing some really good stuff and the refurbishment of our estates anyway. So.
You mentioned just a second ago, like how important it is to have, the right data. How do you ensure that? How do you ensure that, okay, I have the right data in my spreadsheet or my system, and you are reliant on that correct data?
Yeah, I think that a lot of that, for me, a lot of that I think comes from knowledge, from experience. I've had a lot of experience over my career of how data and data's been ever evolving since I've started in my career. So having that base, that knowledge of what we can do with data really has influenced me and it's shaped me. But I think for me, it's about seeing the trends and the patterns and the recurring faults and talking to them about aging components and performance degradation. That's a really important one as well. So having those insights, I think, allows us to get from reactive to predictive. Instead of responding to failure, we're starting to anticipate it, and that shift dramatically improves reliability, reduces long-term costs. I think a lot of it comes from knowledge, but a lot of it comes from thinking outside the box as well, and making sure we're engaging other people, because everybody's got different ideas. I mean, it's about not being frightened to try those ideas and not being frightened to try looking at data differently. So
and we've touched on how you're trying to switch the culture into a reuse and preventative sort of atmosphere. What practical steps are you taking to design like PPM that matches those life cycle management goals?
I think asset criticality really plays into the PPM. So as long as your PPMs align with asset criticality and life cycle strategy, I think the critical systems require, structured preventative maintenance. So lower risk assets may maintain reactively. We may keep those, sweat those assets, but they've got a low criticality. That's okay to do that. You can't change everything all of the time. But I think it's about creating a balanced regime. So where I'm really focusing on our resources where we're going to have the greatest impact. So that would be like the greatest impact again, I'll talk about teaching and research spaces, and where is it hurting the university? Where are we, what's the pain point we're feeling? How does that tie into our risk mitigation? So I think for me, and a PPM is about, data, having the right data. So the right data comes from the discipline you've always got to have. You've got to go along and have the same data, the discipline data, you've got to correct it. You've got to add it into the system. Don't go out and change a part and then not obviously asset tag it and load it into the system, because then we're just creating holes. Then we're just creating gaps. So, and I also think it's a really big part is that you keep it simple. You simplify it, because I think over time you can, everyone's got great ideas and whatnot, but sometimes it can get too complicated. But if you keep it disciplined, and standard and as simple as possible, then I think it's easy for the teams to understand the data and see how that can really drive those decisions that they make. So I think engaging the staff with what we're doing and the data and the collection, that obviously makes data collection and that improves that engagement.
And as well as asset criticality, how do you decide which assets sit under PPM and which can remain reactive? Can it be down to time and to budget as well?
I think it's risk, criticality, and risk. So obviously, statutory compliant. You're not going to get away from statutory compliance. So obviously, that's your number one. You're always going to go to statutory compliancy for safety. But sweating the assets, it depends what the mean time to repair is. It depends what the life cycle strategy is for that asset, etc. So some of those, all of that plays into whether you're going to sweat the asset or whether you're going to actually invest in replacing that. And for me, it comes down to risk mitigation. It comes down to what's that going to do for what's the knock-on effect for the university if I sweat that asset.
And are there any early warning signs that tell you maintenance is becoming unsustainable?
Yeah, the early warning signs for anybody in maintenance has got to be the reactive maintenance is dominating your workload. Your reactive percentage to your PPM, that tells you that it's not going to be sustainable. So increasing asset failures, obviously, growing maintenance backlog, that's something's not right there. You've got rising safety and compliance risk. Anything that's not going out of compliance, you've really got to start looking at, and you're thinking, something's not working. So that for me is the early warning signs. I think, when those trends start to appear, the asset life cycle strategy actually needs some attention. Something's not quite right. Maybe that's staffing, maybe the use has changed. That's what we've got to look at. So
I was going to ask, what would be your steps, once you understand that, okay, it's not sustainable?
All right. Okay. Yeah. So the first step is something I always do is I like to keep a sort of a running rate of where we are from percentage wise preventative to PPM. What's that ratio look like? That's my first indication. I always like to see where the trend is, week in, month in, and that for me is my first sort of look into what's happening there. And I think the increasing asset failures as well. I think once you've got your critical asset list and your asset condition list, then you're obviously getting your eye on your critical assets and whatnot. And if you start to see them failing, that's when you start to think, okay, something's going to risk there. And I know not everybody loves an SLA, but I think when your staff's not managing to meet the SLA, then obviously you've got to look in what's the increase in that. Is it that your staff, maybe you've got staffing issues, meaning you've got recruitment issues, or is it that we've got a full recruitment, we're fully staffed, but our maintenance is just, our backlog is growing? That to me, so we're not meeting it. We're not going to meet it. So therefore we need to look into what those what's happening there. I think that's probably the first one. The first one I always go to is percentage, reactive to PPM all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, Kerry, we like to save these last few questions, for giving your insights, your advice for maintenance leaders. So, if a maintenance leader in a higher education role, they want to move from reactive firefight into life cycle led strategies, what 3 actions should they take first?
Okay. I think first three I would recommend anybody to take is to understand your asset. Understand what you've got. So that's visibility and condition data fundamental. So, you'd put in your asset condition registers, you'd put in your critical asset list, you really need to understand your asset and not be frightened to understand what your asset conditions are. That's okay. That's the worst. Second is you've got to prioritise compliance and safety. So that builds trust across your institution, wherever you may be working. So as long as you're prioritising compliancy and safety, I think you'll start to build that trust. And then the third is shifting the conversation from maintenance task to asset life cycle strategy. So you don't want to start talking about maintenance, and you don't want to keep firefighting. You want to let your institution know that you're changing from being a reactive to you're really thinking about the life cycle strategy. And I think that builds confidence. So
that communication is really key
yes,
to driving in.
Yeah, because it really demonstrates that you're understanding. You're not just there to fight fires. You're not just there to be reactive. You're thinking about the long-term plan. You're thinking about the cost and the risk to wherever you may be working. So all of those, if you put costs and risk together, you can demonstrate that you're actually thinking long-term.
Yeah. And what mindset shift is required to future-proof an estate rather than simply maintain it?
I think that has to be that the estate's a strategic asset for the institution. We've got to think. We've got to realise that our estate is an asset in in its entirety. So universities compete globally for students, academics, and research investments. So the estate plays a major part in that. So I think our responsibility is not just maintaining buildings, but we're creating environments, where the innovation and learning and community can thrive. That's, I think, really important for a university estate.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Kerry, you've been a brilliant guest. Thank you so much for sharing such practical insight, real world experience of maintaining that higher education facilities. I'm sure it'll be, give maintenance leaders a much clearer view of what it takes to manage large estates or small cities, as you put it.
Yeah, small cities. That's I'd like to change. We're changing it to small cities, but yeah.
Yeah. So Kerry, thanks so much again.
Thanks, Ryan. That was really good. Thank you very much.
And thank you all for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.